the President of the United States knows the Vice President's not going to be home. He's going to be meeting His Holiness, the Pope, today overseas. That's going to be a big deal. And the President's going to be giving some remarks at a pro-life rally.
I was sitting next to you.
I know. Oh, Rudy Giuliani's here, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, you buried the lead.
Not the Pope. It's not the Pope.
Hey, Rudy, I know you've got some new evidence you're going to be presenting today.
Lot.
But first, were your ears burning yesterday? Because yesterday the Democrats in their House impeachment proceedings were talking a lot about you. They talked about Lev Parnas, who says the president and you knew everything that he was doing. They showed your phone records. They built a case that you were up to no good for the president.
How about all of those phone records show that I am a very hardworking lawyer who was investigating what really happened, because I didn't go look for dirt on Joe Biden. It was handed to me. And it was handed to me a year, almost a year and a half ago.
You didn't ask for it?
No, I was given information about Ukrainian corruption. It involved by two people, two informants. You're going to find out at least who one of them is, and possibly the second. And they told me that there was a great deal of collusion going on in Ukraine to fix the 2016 election
in the United States
in favor of Hillary, that what happened in Russia was a big hoax, that actually it was the Democrats projecting what they had actually done in Ukraine. I don't know if it was true or not. They gave me witnesses, the two prosecutor generals, the current one and the last one. I've since interviewed 10 of them. I've got 8 of them on tape. I'm going to start a podcast at noon today. And starting next week, the people will hear these witnesses who our embassy will not give a visa to, because they're still covering up the corruption the embassy was involved in.
They don't want them to come to the United States?
The embassy was involved in gathering dirt on Trump Jr., and on Manafort.
Well,
not only that, they were involved in turning over falsified evidence, absolutely completely falsified. 4 witnesses will testify to that over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you.
I'm going to present over the next 2 to 3 weeks shocking crimes at the highest levels of both governments, while the Senate is listening to a totally phony group of stories about non-impeachable offenses. It's like trying somebody for not a crime. It's a total waste of money. It's a complete show on the part of the Democrats.
Right.
And they should be sued for conspiracy to defraud the United States, and they should pay for that hearing.
But Mr. Mayor, do you...
The Democratic National Committee should pay for that television advertising. And you talk about interfering in the 2020 election. You know, I started investigating Biden 2 years ago, when he was thinking about running for president. I never thought he would run. Looked to me like he couldn't cross the street, much less run. I wasn't investigating Biden. In the middle of the corruption presentation, one gentleman said to me, well, you know about the Biden bribe. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, Biden got paid off. And he went to Poroshenko. He forced the prosecutor out. Not only did he get his son out, but he got Burisma out. So one of the things we're going to reveal, we always ask, why did this happen? Why would a crooked Ukrainian oligarch, whose company is about to be taken away from him, who's sitting in Switzerland with $5 billion he stole, all this is just fact. His name is Mykola Zlochevsky. This is all true, what I just said. He hires the son of the vice president, who just got thrown out of the Navy for failing a drug test, had been in and out of rehab most of his life, was a failure in business, and was involved in 2 or 3 other scandals involving his father before, including busted companies where they were using his name, Joe's name. Why would he hire this guy? I'll tell you why. He was buying Joe Biden to protect his company. That money, which is at least $8 million, and it could go up to 20, based on the investigation they're now doing, but at least $8 million in laundered money, some of it. That was to buy Joe Biden's protection if and when Poroshenko came after his company. And then, when it happened, in 1 month, I've got February 2nd of 2016, they raid Burisma offices and close it down. So much for there was no investigation going on. February 15th, they get a notification from Latvia that Hunter Biden is involved in the money laundering. Have it in writing, translated from Russian. And then right after that is when Biden says, get rid of Shokin. And Shokin will testify to that, and I will show you a document that in September of last year, Shokin was taken to the hospital with mercury poisoning.
All right, so let me just get a word in. I know you.
And you know that this happens. You know this happens in Ukraine and Russia.
Right. So
the method of choice is poisoning.
So let's just say that everything you say proves 100% true.
It is 100% true.
Would you also say that the way you approached it, in the short term, which we're in the middle of, has made things worse for the president?
No, I would say the way I approach it is for the benefit of the American people. When the vice president of the United States corrupts the president of another country, that is about as horrendous a crime as you can find.
But don't we have an apparatus to pursue these things?
The apparatus to pursue it was...
And you could still lead it through
Brian, you're being totally naive.
In what way?
The apparatus to look at this refused to look at it. The witnesses will tell you they tried to get this information to us for a year. They were blocked by the embassy. They hired a lawyer to go to the Justice Department to tell them about Ukrainian collusion. And since they didn't know anything about Russian collusion, they were basically thrown out. They will tell you that at least one of the FBI agents was corrupt, and they didn't trust any longer the FBI or the Justice Department because they were convinced that they were still being controlled by Hillary Clinton partisans. Absolutely. Now, these are foreigners, but not a bad conclusion. I couldn't go to them. They wouldn't let me go to them, and if I went to them, they would have laughed at me. I had to prove it first. I had to go prove it because we have, unfortunately, at the highest levels of some of these agencies, they've been either corrupted or intimidated. You know what they're intimidated about? Biden should have been prosecuted already for bribery. It wasn't only one bribe, it was two bribes. The first bribe was Poroshenko, through a lobbying company.
The former leader of Ukraine.
Poroshenko takes over the country. Zlochevsky flees with his $5 billion. Right. Zlochevsky's afraid that Poroshenko is going to take his company. And then Joe Biden gets announced as point man for Ukraine by Obama. Point man, whatever that is. I know what it is, actually. And he says he's going to be giving out the money. They had $800,000 left in their national bank. That's how much money Yanukovych stole. Zlochevsky being one of his mafia members. Zlochevsky had $5 billion of it. They're coming after his money. They're coming after his company. All of a sudden, Biden is announced as the most important guy in Ukraine. He's going to give out the money. Then he hires Biden's son. You know what happened in between? He made a deal with Biden. You be on board to protect me against Poroshenko taking my company. When they moved to take the company, that's when Biden came in and had the prosecutor fired. And within 4 months, the crooked oligarch who's sitting with $5 billion comes back to the Ukraine. He is not prosecuted. Right. He is sitting there fat and happy with his company. And then we got another bribe. You don't think the president of the Ukraine shared in that $5 billion that the crook kept?
Rudy?
The bribe to the president of the Ukraine, the amount of money, I can't be absolutely sure of. Let's say it's well in excess of $10 million.
You know, the entire crowd has...
Now, that shouldn't be revealed from a lawyer who finds out about this? Am I going to cover it up the way the Democrats and the media cover it up? Absolutely not. Rudy? I prosecuted too many corruption cases to sit by and watch my country sold out by a vice president who did it 2 other times at least in China.
So how does this end?
This ends, hopefully, with Biden finally being put under investigation. You don't think if these things were said about Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr., they wouldn't be under investigation immediately? But instead of putting them under investigation, they're coming after me.
Rudy,
they want to kill me.
When are you going to present
in terms of reputation?
Pardon the interruption.
Shokin, they're trying to really kill.
Rudy, when are you going to present the evidence? Because you tell a compelling story.
Well,
people want the proof.
Today at noon, I will give an introduction. Starting next week, I will present witnesses. I have them all on tape.
Okay.
We'll review them one at a time. We'll show there are 2 bribes. Not one, actually 3. First one was Zlochevsky buying Biden, Joe Biden. The second one was Biden bribing Poroshenko to drop the case. And the third one was the huge amount of money that Poroshenko got, the president of Ukraine, for dropping the case.
And does the State Department and the White House know everything you were doing?
The State Department, I gave them my evidence. That's when they moved the ambassador out. And they never bothered to investigate the allegations that she interfered in 4 investigations, that she was campaigning for Hillary Clinton during the 2016 election.
The ambassador.
The ambassador. that one of the cases she had dropped was on George Soros' company Antac.
I didn't hear any of this yesterday.
Antac was gathering dirty information on Trump. That on January 16th of 2016, there was a meeting in the National Security Council, and members of Obama's National Security Council, some people think, including the present whistleblower, told Ukrainian officials to dig up dirt on Trump Jr., and Manafort. In the White House, they said, dig up dirt. And they had the gall to investigate Trump for 2.5 years and $35 million for a phony collusion with Russia when they were colluding to the tune of millions of dollars with the Ukraine. They were charging him with the crime that they know they committed. And the reason these phonies are carrying out this impeachment proceeding is there's a lot more Democratic corruption in Ukraine than you ever thought. You think it's just Biden who is cashing in the Ukraine? And then every time you hear the word Biden was Obama's point man, there's something that follows. The Biden family makes millions of dollars. They got an investment in a $1.5 billion housing program in Iraq when Biden was named point man. They made anywhere from $8 to $20 million in Ukraine. And they got $1.5 billion from the Bank of China when he was point man for China. And the other thing about it is Biden family got rich, millions, each place. In each place, he failed the United States.
Right. And where's
he
that money?
failed. He didn't get a status of forces agreement in Iraq. Right. He couldn't do a damn thing about corruption in Ukraine except make it worse. Joe Biden is a laughingstock in Ukraine. He would go there. He went there 13 times. He'd go there and say, you shouldn't be corrupt. And they'd look at him and say, what, are you kidding? Right. Your son's got a no-show job for millions of dollars. You're in the pocket of Zlochevsky, and you're telling us not to be corrupt. You know how that hurts the United States of America?
I have a feeling you could go clear till noon when your podcast starts. Give it up for Rudy Giuliani. We're going to be watching. We're going to be watching.
That's the real case.
A lot of headlines out of that.
That's only the tip of the iceberg. There are other people involved. There's a lot more money involved. There was a pattern of corruption there.
Yeah, we got to go. And the president wants you to continue this? The president wants to get you to continue this investigation?
Well, would you like me to give it up? Would you like me to just say, okay, Biden can keep his $8 million that he got in bribes. He can keep all the bribes that they got in.
We're waiting for noon.
Should I give it up, Brian?
I'll just
leave.
Okay.
All right,
I'm scared of them attacking me. They're a bunch of phonies. I did my job as an attorney. I did it well. I did it honorably. And I did the country a service in bringing out this corruption that everybody else is afraid to touch.
All right, Rudy Giuliani.
Let's see what our next guest thinks. President Trump's personal attorney and former New York City Mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Mayor, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thank you very much.
So
I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. So, I listen to Adam Schiff, and before you were mayor of New York City, you were a well-known prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, among other places. Rudy, I need to get your take on the strategy of the Democratic House impeachment managers. I hear people saying, oh, they're eloquent and they're laying out this master case for impeachment and they're going to sway Republicans. I want to get your take on their legal strategy, their legal acumen, in particular, Adam Schiff.
Well, I mean, it's very, very easy to impress people who are biased in your favor. In fact, they're not only biased in your favor, they're kind of a little crazy, over the top, hating Trump. And basically, if you just stand up and say, good morning, you're brilliant. And if you point out the fact that these are not impeachable offenses, they don't have any evidence, it's all hearsay, and there's a case out there of corruption on Democrats that is massive, possibly one of the biggest scandals in the history of the United States, because the press attacks you and makes them really, really smart. I think Adam Schiff, first of all, I think he's a congenital liar, and I think he's a terrible lawyer. I think that if this were being done in a court, the case had been thrown out the first day for failure to charge a crime. He would be fired for having wasted the money of the prosecutor's office on a defective indictment.
Now, let me ask you about that, because you had tweeted something the other day. I thought it was a masterstroke. You said, look, if any normal, I'll paraphrase what you tweeted, but you basically said if a normal prosecutor in any legitimate, normal court of law brought this indictment before a judge and asked for it to be dismissed, it would be summarily, immediately dismissed.
Well, I tell you, if any prosecutor had brought this before the judge I clerked for, the 2 years federal judge I clerked for, the guy might have been put in jail.
Wow.
I mean, he certainly would be threatened with contempt. I mean, you charge. Rule 12 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure says that you've got to challenge an indictment before trial if it fails to state a crime. This fails to state an impeachable offense. He doesn't get to make up impeachable offenses.
Right.
The Constitution provides the limits on congressional power. They have to find bribery, treason, a high crime, or misdemeanor. There's never been an impeachment of a president without that.
Well, let me ask you about witnesses. That's the big debate, right? That's top of news right now. It's headline news. Are there going to be witnesses? Aren't there going to be witnesses? The big question is, will there be a trade, a swap? The Bidens for Bolton. So first and foremost, should John Bolton, if there are going to be witnesses, should John Bolton testify or should he not for the reasons the president raised? He just has too much national security information. It could irreparably damage relations with other nations if the Democrats go down certain roads.
I don't think there should be witnesses. I think the case should be thrown out at the conclusion of the opening statements. I thought it should have been dismissed before there were even opening statements for failure to charge an impeachable offense. When we finish, we're going to hear not only did they fail to charge an impeachable offense, but by the time you finished at both of their opening statements, you're going to find out the president didn't do anything wrong. The abuse of power was actually an exercise of presidential responsibility to make sure the laws are faithfully executed. He was dealing with allegations of massive corruption in the Ukraine. The Bidens made millions illegally in the Ukraine. And so did a lot of other people. That's a stain on the reputation of the United States. In the Ukraine, we're a laughingstock. Every time Biden would go there and tell them they shouldn't be corrupt, they'd laugh their heads off because they say, you and your son are pulling millions out of here. You're being paid by the most corrupt guy in Ukraine.
So let me ask you,
realize how that damages the relationship between our two countries? That has to be a solid one in order to stand up against Russia. And President Trump had the guts to do something about it. There are people in Ukraine who say, thank God you finally have a president, because you've always been accusing us of corruption. But you guys, the Americans, share in a lot of it. Particularly under Obama, it got really bad.
Let me ask you about that.
The Democrats are doing this because they're covering up. If you begin to open up the Biden case, it's going to rip apart the Obama administration.
So that's what I was going to ask you. So you're saying definitively that when it comes to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and people around them, with regards to Ukraine and corruption, that it's not simply smoke, there's actual fire there.
I have the facts. I have the documents. I got the tapes. I got the witnesses on tape. I've got them sitting here, and I'm going to put it out over the next 3 weeks. I'm going to do a podcast for 3-4 weeks in a row, and each segment is going to be devoted to one witness after another, after another, after another. These are the witnesses that the U.S. Embassy in Kiev prevented from coming to the United States. These are the witnesses the FBI won't talk to. These are the witnesses the Justice Department didn't want to hear from because they wanted to explain Ukrainian collusion. All they wanted to hear about was Russian collusion. All they wanted to do was hurt the president. But I mean, if Democrats pay money for false information and use it to hurt Trump, that's perfectly okay. They don't care about it.
Well, I mean, that's been the trend.
I'm his defense lawyer, and I'm going to make sure they care about it. And this whole idea that we were digging up dirt on Joe Biden is ridiculous. I wasn't digging up dirt on Joe Biden. I was getting evidence of Ukrainian collusion with Democrats, and the dirt was handed to me on a silver platter. And it isn't dirt. It's solid evidence of two big bribes that Biden participated in while he was vice president of the United States.
Now, do you think that, did this go back to Marie Yovanovitch? Did this go back to Bill Taylor, all of these people that testified against the president?
I can't say about Taylor, but Yovanovitch certainly played a role in covering this up.
Wow.
More than one witness can testify that she prevented them from coming to the United States. And it was quite clear because they had incriminating evidence about Democrats. and that she was a very, very partisan Hillary person during the election, and that she demanded that a case on George Soros's company be dismissed. There's documentary proof of that she perjured herself when she said that she didn't want Shokin to come because he was on a corruption list. He was never on any such list. Actually, the reason she gave was a specious reason about he was in ill health. There's so much on Yovanovitch, it's ridiculous that they are sanctifying her. I mean, she was aware of the false evidence that was created in Ukraine in order to, in the words of two witnesses, destroy the Trump campaign. So she's up to her eyeballs in this, and the State Department has been covering up for her.
What happens?
They never bothered to. State Department has all these allegations. They've decided she's innocent without investigating.
So what happens to the Democratic Party going into the 2020 elections when all of this becomes public knowledge?
I think the American people, if we can get it through to them, get it through the vast media cover-up, the American people will be shocked at the level of corruption that went on in the Obama administration. And it doesn't end with Ukraine. I mean, Biden did the same thing in Iraq, where his brother got 1/3 of a $1.5 billion housing contract just when he gets appointed point man.
Yeah.
And then it happened in China when he went to try to get China to withdraw from the islands. Of course, he failed, like he always does, but the family got rich. I mean, every time Joe became a point man, he struck out for the United States, and the family got millions.
So let me ask you this, because I have to. So what do you say to those on the left who allege you were the one who broke the rules, you were the one who broke the laws with regards to Ukraine?
I didn't break any rules. I did exactly what I should do as a defense lawyer. I was given evidence handed to me of alternative explanation for the false crime that my client was charged with. I was given that evidence in November of 2018, 2 years before the 2020 election, before Joe Biden was a candidate, and when Mueller was trying to frame Donald Trump for Russian collusion. So I'm not going to investigate explanations that a lot of this originated in Ukraine,
right,
and that it was orchestrated by Democrats in Ukraine, and that money was paid in the Ukraine for false information, and that one of the people involved in it was Joe Biden. I was going to get scared away because Joe Biden was involved in it.
Yeah.
Just because you're a potential candidate for vice president,
right?
You can take $5-8 million in bribes.
Yeah, I always thought that was a ludicrous assertion.
I mean, everybody would run for president if that was the case.
Mayor, before I let you go, Bill Barr, John Durham, a lot of people on the right, many of us, conservatives, are very frustrated at what we saw happen to President Trump. We saw people like Peter Strzok and Comey and McCabe and James Clapper all walk. Is anybody going to get prosecuted, in your opinion? You prosecuted many high-profile figures.
Well, my opinion is very, very firm on it. People have to get prosecuted to prevent this from happening again.
Yeah.
This is a terrible thing that has happened to our country. This is a terrible, terrible thing. They literally first tried to prevent him from becoming president illegally. I will be able to prove that they created evidence, leaked it out, and had a plan to destroy his candidacy with that evidence. Then, having failed in doing that, they created a phony investigation, and then a second phony investigation, and then this ridiculous impeachment. He's being impeached for two things: for asking the president of another country to investigate mind-blowing corruption involving the highest levels of both governments, the president of one country and the vice president of another. If he didn't do it, he wouldn't be a good president.
Right.
And number two, he's being impeached because he's challenging subpoenas, which every president of the United States has done. Obama did it constantly. And the first person to assert executive privilege, you asked me about Bolton, first person to assert executive privilege was George Washington, when he refused to allow the correspondence with John Jay to be given to the House of Representatives because they opposed the Jay Treaty. He refused to give it to them. And believe it or not, some of those idiots threatened him with impeachment.
So
It was back in 1797.
So there's nothing, this is historical precedent.
In those days, we had statesmen in Congress, and the statesmen shot down the Schiffs and the Pelosi's. And unfortunately, the Schiffs and the Pelosi's are running the ship now. And they have no concern, or at least their hatred of Trump far outweighs any concern they have about our country or our Constitution. So people have to be held accountable. Biden has to be held accountable for the years and years that his family got wealthy selling his public office. It's not one act. It's not two. Point man became the most lucrative job in Washington. Joe becomes a point man, family makes millions. Joe becomes a point man, family makes millions. Read Schweiker's book just came out.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
It's good stuff. Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that we don't have equal justice in this country.
I couldn't agree more.
It has to be restored. That's one of the ways that Donald Trump can help to fix America, where we all get judged by the same standard. I mean, imagine if Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. were involved in Donald Trump Jr. getting $1 billion from China and the Bank of China being his partner in a private equity firm.
Oh,
you think I'd have to be arguing the case, or there'd be 10 special prosecutors by now?
And front page headlines globally.
Oh, the New York Times would make it, 10 times worse than it actually was, and it would be pretty bad.
You know, I agree with every word you say.
We all know that. We all know that. Every single American knows that if it were Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr., instead of this media cover-up, there'd be a media pile-on. It shouldn't be that way, and it shouldn't affect prosecutors at all. They shouldn't be intimidated by the fact that the press is going to rip them apart if they do the right thing.
Well, unless they're complicit,
Constitution to handle it, then don't become a prosecutor.
Unless they're complicit with the other side, which we saw with many on.
Well, a lot of them are. All of Mueller's staff were a bunch of activist Democrats.
Yeah, I mean that was the big problem. Mayor Rudy Giuliani, an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems, or go to NewsmaxTV.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.